So there's been a lot of people that are interested in processing their own meat birds. And we've learned a lot of tips and tricks along our trials and errors through the process of raising our own meat birds. So hopefully this will increase your mortality rate in raising your own meat bird.
You're going to get your meat birds one of two different ways. Either you're going to order it from a hatchery and have to go pick them up at the post office, or if you're lucky enough to be near a hatchery, which I think is the best thing, to go get it directly from there. I don't like the entire postal route. It's not my favorite way to get the birds. And in our experience, we did a bulk buy with a co-op group, and it came from a hatchery. They never were in the post office, and I feel like our success rate with them had a lot to do with that. Before I go and pick up the chicks, I always set up the brooder ready for them. I like the first week to start them off inside the house in a plastic tote, a mini brooder, and I like to get the heat going so that it's not too much of a shock to the babies when they go in there. I also have their water set up, and I like to use the electrolyte water mix that I get at Tractor Supply, but I've also done apple cider vinegar garlic honey mix with water as well, which is also recommended, just to give them some nutrients. And I only do that for the first week. I give them that special water. And when I bring home the birds and introduce them to the brooder, I always dip their beak into the water to get them knowing exactly where that is. And that has always helped me with them.
Now, one thing we just learned from Pete from Just a Small Acres is he was talking about just introducing them to water for the first 2 to 4 hours, and that was going to help reduce some of the pasty butt. So that is one thing that we incorporated with this batch when we first hatched out our own meat bird.
Another thing that we have made changes on, just from some lessons over this past 3 batches we've done, is we do not use a medicated feed that is available. We will not select that. We've had more problems with pasty butt using the medicated feed than not. And I don't know if that's just our luck, but that's our experience, and I feel like it's worth sharing that. Now, as far as the heat lamp goes, there's a lot of controversy about that. A lot of people are into the heat plates. We're still doing the lamps. I have nothing against either because I've had success with the lamps. The heat plates, the amount of birds for us, it really affects how much room there is in the box, and that's the only reason why we have it. And what we're doing has been working, so I'm fine for the lamps right now. And I like to have the temperature around 100 degrees. Previously, we were using little thermometer strips, just an outside one that we had in. Since then, we have upgraded to digital monitor. We have 3 different ones that we can keep track of 3 different boxes, up to 3 boxes if we want. And I feel like that's really been helpful for us in monitoring the temperatures because they are very sensitive that first week to temperatures.
And we got this idea from Miss Cheryl from Lady Cheryl's Food Forest. She was used this to kind of regulate and see what her temperature is out in her greenhouse. So I was like, we could use that for our brooder boxes, and that's why I'd use that one for there.
And it doesn't matter for us whether they've been out in the shop or in their boxes inside the house. That digital monitor reads on the receiver.
Yeah.
And so that's worked great for us.
So we got this brooder box idea from Joel Salatin. It came very handy when we ordered our 100 meat birds of the American breast. This is an 8x8. It can hold up to 250 chicks. We decided to split it off because when we got our chicks, they got them at separate times. So we decided to split them up this way.
And initially we had turkeys.
Oh yeah, we had turkeys on one side and egg layers on another side. One of our viewers was wondering, since we have this for about a year now, wondering how the wheels on here have been holding up because they thought that the wheels wasn't going to last as long. As you can see, it's lasting very well.
It's a champ.
Yeah. Now on this, you definitely want to make sure you have great ventilation. So we got this window area on both sides to allow breeze to go through, especially around this the summer months. And the good thing about this is we do a deep bed littering method for our chicks, is because once they're in here, they're going to soil the bedding in here pretty heavily, and we just use pine shavings.
And I did a Saturday lime in between each layer every time we put another layer.
The birds' nostrils or respiratory system very sensitive. So once you start to smell that ammonia, they probably already been smelling. So we normally do about every 3 to 4 days, add more bedding on there. We start off with about 3 to 4 inches and keep on adding that many in here.
And we just turned around and compost ours.
We're about to put this out in our compost bin as well. But another good thing that Mrs. Nakid Gardener did was she added these little landscape thing that we use as a protective barrier. So if it ever gets extremely hot.
Well, they were jumping out at me.
Yeah.
The turkeys.
Yeah, so what we can also do is just add this right here. So it kind of takes the heat, but it still allows the breeze to go through here, and it helps them keep inside as well.
And I implemented this chicken wire divider just because when they start getting jumpy at the end, sometimes they were flying over and visiting the other group.
This is a good thing that you want to have, somewhere to keep your chickens in right before you introduce them into the real world.
Now we have it to where it opens up on both sides, and there were times when we were out here doing just different tasks that we would just have it open, extra breathe time, a little oxygen for them, especially as we were getting them ready to go out on the grass.
Now, after about 14 to 21 days, we just don't put them in the meat tractor right away. Just like our vegetables and our seedlings, we want to harden them off to get into the real world. And what we normally do is we let them spend some grass time out in here every so often, just to kind of get used to picking out the grass and foraging around, doing some dust bathing and things of that nature.
We have some baby chicks in here right now that we're doing that with right now.
And this is a very good meat tractor for us since we're aging in place. We don't have any hired help or anything.
We have bad backs.
And so it allows us to enter in here, go in there and pick our animals out and in when we're hardening them off in between transition phases.
I don't put the wheels on immediately. I'm really glad that he modified this to be a little bit of a lighter weight one, because I learned over this past year that if I put the wheels on and they're still a certain size, they'll like slip out underneath. This is light enough for me to pull it without the wheels. And I like that because when they're little, until they get like 4 weeks in here, until they're starting to get fattened up, they'll slide out underneath. And I like that I can move this without the wheels.
Once they get up into the size though, then that's when you add the wheels. Then you add the rope, and then you pull it to the length of the tractor. And then from there, that's when you can change out the water, and add the feed. And you want to do this is because you don't want to be walking into the poop. Because most of these meat birds, they get real messy inside there.
What we found that had worked for us is originally we thought we were going to feed our meat birds fertilized feed, but what we've discovered that works best is actually giving them dry feed and doing it in a 12 hours on or 12 hours off is the method that they refer to it as, although we found that about 8 hours worked good for us because we move our birds 3 times a day. We find that they eat grass a little bit more. They kind of offset that. And I really don't want them marinating in their poop all day. And that's another thing.
Yeah.
And we found that it worked best to move them because they correlated us to feed. So if we went up to the tractor and we went to move it, they came right up because they were expecting feed, and they actually walked with it. It probably took about 2 weeks for them to kind of catch on to that concept. I was always worried about catching their little legs in the back, aside from them slipping out. But they caught on to it really fast. In introducing the dry feed, the dry meat feed, because it's higher in protein, we discovered that they really need a lot more water. When you change them over that way, they need more water.
And that's the good thing about this Johnson Scovis tractor is you can modify any type of way for hanging devices. During the Texas extreme heat times, we had 2 waterers hanging for them to drink and had just one hanging feeder for them, and we'll just fill that up about 3 to 4 scoopfuls, depending on how many birds that we had in there. Now, if you're going to be raising meat birds during the heat of the summer months or whatever, you want to make sure you're paying attention to your birds. Now, birds, they don't sweat, they pant like a dog. And if you see them panting, that means they're extremely hot. So you want to make sure you have enough water for them to be hydrated, because you don't want them to pass out during heat exhaust, especially if you're raising Cornish crosses.
And not just the water that you have hanging. When they're panting that way, they like to get their feet wet. We have some 3-gallon dishes that we filled with water, and they would get their feet wet. We would also spray down the grass, especially when it was fresh and they were just there, and that would help them. And we would spray down the grass right before we would move them into the new areas also when it was that hot. Now, something we did, just getting kind of accustomed to how much weight they were gaining, that was something we really wanted to pay attention to. We didn't want excessively large birds that couldn't walk. So the last 3 weeks of their life, we would weekly do a weigh-in and make sure that they were averaging a certain amount of pounds. So if you have a scale, that's great. If you don't, I think we shared before in another video about a digital scale that's battery operated, that we were able to take out in the field. And all we did was grab about 5 of them and average about what their average weights were, so that we had an idea, because they'll be about a pound less than that once they're dressed, right?
Correct. Up to the day of freezer camp, we make sure they have a lot of water to make sure they stay hydrated. And that way, just empty out their crop. So that way, when we process them, nothing's in there. It's a clean process.
The last 24 hours before processing, we do not give them any food. They are on grass. They can snack on whatever grass they have. We just make sure they have all the water that they need.
Now comes processing day. This is a very key element that you want to definitely be prepared for. The day prior to doing your processing day, you want to have all of your stations set up and do a little test run to make sure everything flows very well for you.
One of the reasons that we like to set up the day before is we like to work out all the kinks. We have learned to go through the process and check all systems in place, check how many hoses, and making sure these things work, because we've gone through enough situations now where we have found the problems. The biggest problem is always the scalder.
You want to make sure that you have your meat tractor or whatever you holding your birds in close as possible, so that way it's a less of a trip for you. You have to carry that chicken up to the kill cone. Now for the processing, you have your kill cones. You could use almost anything for kill cones. We got ours from Murray McMurray Hatchery. However, you can make a kill cone out of 5-gallon buckets, safety cones, or whatever it may be that you can makeshift of your kill cone.
And recently we learned another method, a broomstick method. Some people don't even use combs. So I like to be at the kill station. That's really become kind of my thing that I like. Not that I like it, but it's the station that I prefer. And I like to have a bucket sitting there in between the cones, like a bleach water mix. So between each dispatch, I can just dip the knife into that and clear it off, because blood coagulates on the blade and it'll make it dull. I think in the future, I would also add a little sharpening block in our station as I need it, to just be able to use it on the go.
Speaking of, you definitely want to make sure you have your knives sharp and ready on this day, because a dull knife will make for a long processing day.
It's a showstopper.
Yeah. One thing we got from Kaylee from the Honeystead is she sprayed down her kill cones with some oil, so that way after the end of the day, it makes it a lot easier for you to clean up, and the blood just doesn't stay on those kill cones and around the buckets.
And as the person that cleans the stuff, because you know he ain't doing it, I had an aha moment when I saw that, and I was like, okay, I'm always gonna do that.
So like I said, we're always learning from everybody. Every time we take these classes, yeah, we have done these plenty of times, but it's always interesting to find out how different people does their particular method.
Yeah, a lot of people, you know, they have their system in place and they're always going to do it a particular way. I feel like we've been in an interesting position to go to several different ones. And I would still pay to go do more classes.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like every single time we picked up something. And because of that, I think it's made us really good teachers now.
Yeah. You want to take it off to a scalding, your scalding station. Now, this is one of the two main things that you definitely need to have at your station. With the water, you want to have anywhere from 149 degrees to no higher than 152 degrees. Thing with ours is we always have to constantly monitor in ours. We want to get an automatic one, kind of like how Justin Rose has his.
I find that it's best for whoever's on the kill station, at least in our setup, to be the one that's monitoring the temperature on that. It just, because the other person that's on evisceration station, like their hands are busy the entire time. So whoever is at the kill station, it is better for them in between each bird to go and check on that. And that's something I do usually on the kill station, is monitor that. And oftentimes I'm dipping the birds in there and getting them ready for the evisceration station.
After you get the chicken in the water, you want to have it in there for anywhere from 45 seconds up to about a minute. You're going to pull the tail feathers or the wing feathers to see if the feathers pull out easily. Then you know it's good to go to the next station.
Always keep the breast in there the least amount of time, because breast meat cooks fast, and you don't want to have a par-cooked bird going in to the plucker.
If anything else, I would definitely make sure I have a plucker on this system, because the plucker, we've done plucking of a bird manually and it's not fun, especially if you're doing as many as we do normally. You definitely want to get a plucker. And it's just a machine, kind of look like a washing machine with some rubber silicone fingers that's able to take off the feathers of the whatever bird that you have.
It's worth the investment, and if not the investment, if you're doing a large quantity of birds, at least look into your local area, check to see if there's a co-op that'll at least let you rent it for the day.
So you just put this in there, you spray it down, in about 10 to 15 seconds, your bird should be darn near clean. And then you just send it off to the next station of the evisceration table. And now with the evisceration table, that's where all the stuff really happens. And that normally takes anywhere from 2 minutes to 5 minutes, depending on how well equipped and how efficient you are.
I want to say that you can watch as many videos about doing it as possible that's available on YouTube or wherever, but it is never going to be the same as when you actually put your hands on that bird and actually feel the membrane. You have to have your hands-on experience to get this.
And there's certain equipment that I find helpful for me, but it's all optional, like a lung remover, a pinning knife that if you have any pin feathers that you have to remove, and definitely some sharp paring knives to make sure you're able to cut a clean cut and get everything off from the chicken feet to the oil glands, to open up the area to get all the guts, the hearts, the livers, be able to clean off that bird and put it into the coolers. Now with the coolers, something that we learned from one of our classes was, instead of buying ice, because that's always been a good commodity that we always have to worry about the expense of.
And the day of, like, it's a time spender too.
So
it's not just money, it's time.
Yeah, so we just get an empty gallon milk jug and we put water in and put it in the freezer, and then in the cooler we just put it in with some water. We'll put about 2 of them and we just put all our birds in there, well, most of our birds in each of the coolers as it stayed cool. We want to try to get the temperature down for at least up to 24 hours in there before we package it up.
Yeah, I think that we've discovered that it takes about 2 of those frozen milk jugs for each of our coolers, and I think depending on the size of the birds that we can fit anywhere from 9, and if it's the breeze, up to 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the size that we can fit in our coolers.
Then the next day, that's when you want to package your meats up. You want to drain it, allow your chicken to cool dry, and then you package it up. What we normally do is we do a shrink wrap. We'll have some zip ties. We'll have our labels on it since we sell some of our meat birds. Put a straw in the cavity of the shrink wrap. Make sure we get all the air out of the bird as possible that's in the plastic shrink wrap. stick it in the water. The water you want to get anywhere from 175 to 200 degrees, and you dip it in there for about 5 seconds, and take the chicken out with the zip tie on there and tighten it up, and it's good as gold.
Something I want to say is that we very intentionally start processing our birds in the morning on a Saturday morning because of the time constraints, and you have to wait about 24 to 48 hours of them being chilled in cool water before you can go through the whole shrink bag process. So we know what our Sunday evening is going to look like if we process on a Saturday morning.
What that also does, allows you to not just put all that warm chicken meat into your freezer, which is going to possibly defrost some of your other meats or whatever products that you have in the freezer.
An extra little tip that I want to add is at the kill station, something I have found when we're doing a two-man situation is having something to tie the feet down. It allows me to move on to the next station. If you have a lot of people and you can have somebody there standing and holding the legs, that's great. But if it's one person, it's another showstopper if you don't have a way to tie down the legs, because they're gonna kick, and they can kick themselves out of that cone very easily. It's happened.
Yeah.
That's something that I highly recommend if this is gonna be like a two-man operation or a one-man operation, is to have a way to tie down the legs.
Now, we've been getting very comfortable with doing these butcherings, that we even started doing classes now, where we've done 2 classes. And our last one, we started with Jen, where we didn't know she was going to start her own YouTube channel. So something that I didn't know about is Jen is about to start her own YouTube channel. Tell us about your channel.
The name of my channel is Whole Living Homestead, and it was named after a co-op I had when I first started getting into whole foods and natural eating and things like that, and it's extended to our homestead. And currently we have goats, kuni pigs, chickens. We're working on getting our garden going again, growing some things, and it's just our journey through getting more self-sufficient step by step. And I feel like if we can shorten the learning curve for other people and they can watch us do it, it gives them the confidence to do it. So I'm looking forward to sharing our learning experience with people and having them follow along with us.
All right. So have you always been a homesteader? Is this something that are your first time generation homesteaders? Or?
I'm a first generation homesteader. I did grow up in the country. My husband grew up in the city, but we definitely have that like mindset of wanting to be out in the country and being self-sufficient as much as possible. So, and we've been working towards that goal, learning a little at a time over probably the last 10 years, but really getting more involved in the self-sufficiency and the animal part of it in the last few years.
Now, if you want to be part of our butchering class, make sure you hit us up on email, and in the subject line, make sure you put Butchering Class 101.
And we'll just update you when we have classes that are coming up.
Now, if you want to see a week-by-week process on raising your meat birds from start to finish, our friend Emma is doing an excellent job, and she's created a playlist. We'll put that off to the side. If you want to see how we raise our turkeys and butcher them from start to finish, we'll put that off to the sides as well and down in the description. Until the next video, let's grow together.